I remember that morning as clearly as if it happened yesterday. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 32 years old, and at the time, I was just an ordinary waiter working at a small cafe near the waterfront in Portland, Oregon. The cafe was called Harbor Moon. It wasn't fancy. The wooden floor creaked when customers walked across it, the windows rattled whenever the wind came in from the river, and the coffee machine was so old that sometimes we had to hit the side of it just to make it work. But I loved that place. Every morning, I unlocked the front door before sunrise, turned on the lights, started the coffee machines, and listened to the quiet sound of the city slowly waking up. My life was simple. Work. Go home. Take care of my mother. Repeat. I had never been interested in luxury cars, expensive clothes, or the kind of life people showed off on social media. I didn't have much money, but I had enough to pay our rent and keep food on the table. And most importantly, I had my mother. Her name was Mara Cole. She was 60 years old, and she had raised me alone for as long as I could remember. She worked most of her life doing laundry and cleaning houses. Her hands were rough, her back often hurt, and there were tiny scars on her fingers from years of hard work. But she never complained. Whenever I asked about my father, she always gave me the same answer. He left before you were old enough to remember him. That was it. No name. No photograph. No explanation. Eventually, I stopped asking. I learned that sometimes the people we love most are also the people carrying the heaviest secrets. There was, however, one thing about my mother that had always fascinated me. A tattoo on the inside of her left wrist. 2 black rings, intertwined with each other. The ink had faded badly over the years, but the design was still easy to recognize. When I was a kid, I once asked her what it meant. She smiled sadly and said, "It was a promise I made a long time ago." To Dad? She had looked away. To someone who no longer matters. I believed her. At least, I thought I did. Until the morning everything changed. It was raining that day. Not heavily. Just a cold Portland drizzle that covered the streets with a thin layer of silver. Harbor Moon was unusually crowded. Businessmen stopped in for coffee before work. Students occupied the tables near the windows. Tourists wandered in from the waterfront, shaking rain from their jackets. Around 9:30, the door opened. The little bell above it rang. And he walked in. Victor Blackwood. Everyone in Portland knew that name. Victor Blackwood was one of the richest men in the country. He had built Blackwood Industries, an enormous technology and energy company with offices across the United States. The newspapers called him a visionary. The business magazines called him ruthless. People who knew him personally described him as brilliant, intimidating, and almost impossible to read. He was 69 years old. Tall. Silver-haired. Always dressed in perfectly tailored dark suits. And strangely enough, he came to our tiny cafe almost every morning. He always sat at the same table beside the window. He always ordered the same thing. Black coffee. No sugar. Nothing else. I had served him hundreds of times. We never talked much. "Morning, Mr. Blackwood." "Morning." "Your usual?" "Yes." That was usually the entire conversation. But I had noticed something about him. For a man who could buy almost anything in the world, he always looked lonely. Sometimes he would sit for nearly an hour, staring through the window at the river. Not using his phone. Not reading the newspaper. Just staring. As if he were waiting for someone who had been gone for a very long time. That morning, I prepared his coffee and carried it toward his table. I was halfway there when a customer suddenly stepped backward. He collided with me. The tray flew sideways. The coffee cup tipped. And the boiling black coffee poured directly onto Victor Blackwood's chest. The cafe went silent. I froze. Oh my God. My face burned. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't see. I grabbed a towel and rushed toward him. But Victor didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply looked down at his ruined suit. Then he slowly smiled. "It's all right," he said. "It's only coffee." He removed his jacket. Then he rolled up the sleeve of his white shirt. And that was when I saw it. A tattoo. Right there on his wrist. 2 intertwined black rings. I stopped breathing. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The sound of the cafe disappeared. The rain outside disappeared. Everything disappeared. All I could see were those 2 rings. The exact same design. The exact same position. The exact same faded black ink. My mother's tattoo. I stared at his wrist. Then at his face. Then back at the tattoo. My voice barely came out. "Sir." Victor looked at me. I pointed toward his wrist. "That tattoo." His expression changed. "What about it?" I swallowed. "My mother has the exact same one." The smile disappeared from his face. His hands slowly stopped moving. "What did you say?" "My mother," I repeated. "She has the same tattoo." Victor stared at me as if I had just spoken a language he hadn't heard in decades. "What is your mother's name?" I hesitated. "Mara." His face went completely white. "Mara," he whispered. Then he said her last name. "Is her name Mara Cole?" My heart started pounding. Yes. The man in front of me suddenly looked 20 years older. His fingers trembled. His lips parted, but no words came out. Then, without warning, Victor Blackwood pushed his chair backward. He stood. Took 1 step toward me. And collapsed to his knees. Right there in the middle of Harbor Moon. Everyone gasped. I rushed forward. "Mr. Blackwood." But he wasn't looking at me like a billionaire. He wasn't looking at me like a businessman. He was looking at me like a man who had just found something he had spent his entire life believing was lost forever. Tears rolled down his face. He grabbed my hands. And in a broken whisper, he said 4 words that would change my life forever. "My son, you're my son." Underscore 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 underscore. I frowned. That doesn't make sense. It will. He looked at me. "Your mother will tell you." We reached my neighborhood. It was an old working-class area where small houses stood close together. Nothing about it looked like the world Victor Blackwood belonged to. I parked outside our little house. Victor stared at it. Then he whispered. "She lived here all these years?" "Yes." His eyes filled with tears again. I opened the door. "Come on." We walked to the front entrance. I knocked. "Mom?" No answer. I knocked again. "Mom, it's me." A few seconds later, the door opened. My mother stood there holding a kitchen towel. She looked at me. Then she looked at Victor. And froze. The color disappeared from her face. The towel slipped from her fingers. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my mother whispered 1 word. "Victor." I turned toward her. "You know him?" She didn't answer. Victor took 1 step forward. "Mara." She suddenly backed away. "No." Her voice was shaking. "No, you don't get to come here. Please. Leave. Mara, please. You had 32 years. Her eyes filled with tears. 32 years, Victor. I stared at them. My mother had never looked at anyone with that kind of hatred. But behind the hatred, I saw something else. Love. A love so old and wounded that it looked almost like anger. Victor lowered his head. I know. No, you don't. She wiped her tears. You don't know what it was like. Then she looked at me. And I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of Victor. Fear of the truth. I stepped between them. Mom. She closed her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she slowly opened the door wider. Come inside. Victor entered. We sat in the small living room. The room suddenly felt too small for three people carrying 30 years of secrets. My mother sat across from Victor. I sat between them. Finally, she looked at me. Ethan. Her voice broke. I think it's time you knew who your father really was. My heart pounded. She looked at Victor. Then back at me. His name is Victor Blackwood. She took a long breath. And he is your father. Underscore 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 underscore. The room became completely silent. I stared at my mother. Then at Victor. Then back at my mother. My whole life suddenly seemed like a lie. You knew? My voice was barely a whisper. You knew who my father was all these years? My mother lowered her head. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? She began to cry. Because I wanted to protect you. From what? She looked toward Victor. From them. Victor closed his eyes. I didn't understand. Who? My mother wiped her cheeks. His family. Victor finally spoke. They never wanted me to marry her. My mother gave a bitter laugh. Marry me? She looked directly at him. You were too afraid to even stand beside me. Victor flinched. She continued. I was 28 years old. I worked at a small tailoring shop. Your father came in one afternoon to have a suit repaired. She smiled sadly. We started talking. Then she touched the tattoo on her wrist. We fell in love. Victor slowly rolled up his sleeve again. The two intertwined rings were clearly visible. We made these tattoos together, my mother said. 2 rings. One for each of us. She looked down. We thought we would be together forever. I couldn't speak. My entire childhood suddenly looked different. Every time she touched that tattoo. Every time she refused to talk about my father. Every time she became quiet when someone mentioned wealthy families. It all made sense now. My mother continued. Then Victor's father found out about me. Victor's face hardened. They threatened her. My mother nodded. They said I was trying to trap their son. I wasn't. She looked at me. I loved him. Her voice cracked. But they offered me money. I stared at her. You took it? She shook her head immediately. No. Victor looked down. They threatened to destroy her. My mother nodded. They threatened my job. My home. They told me that if I stayed with Victor, they would make sure he lost everything. She paused. And then I discovered I was pregnant. My heart stopped. With me? She nodded. Yes. Victor covered his face with his hands. I didn't know. My mother looked at him. You didn't know because I was forced to disappear. You could have told me. I tried. Victor looked up. What? I wrote to you. She pointed toward an old wooden cabinet. I wrote 6 letters. Victor stared at her. I never received them. I know. My mother smiled bitterly. Because your family intercepted every one. Victor stood suddenly. They did what? You heard me. He looked devastated. I thought you left me. And I thought you abandoned us. Neither of them spoke. Then my mother looked at me. I left the city before you were born. She explained that she had moved to a small town, worked during the day, and raised me alone. She never remarried. She never dated again. She devoted everything to me. I didn't want you growing up knowing that your father had chosen money over us. Victor shook his head. I was young. My mother stared at him. So was I. I was afraid. So was I. I made the wrong choice. You made a choice. Those words hit him harder than anything else. Victor sat down again. His shoulders collapsed. For the first time, I didn't see the billionaire. I saw an old man. A man who had spent 3 decades carrying regret. He looked at me. I should have found you. I didn't answer. I should have searched. I still said nothing. I should have fought harder. My anger began to rise. Yes. He looked at me. I finally said what I had been holding inside. You should have. Victor nodded. I know. There was no excuse in his voice. No arrogance. No attempt to defend himself. Only regret. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out an old photograph. He placed it on the table. It showed a young man and a young woman standing beside a river. They were smiling. Their wrists were touching. And I recognized my mother's face immediately. Beside her stood a much younger Victor Blackwood. They looked happy. In love. Almost innocent. Victor touched the photograph. I carried this for 33 years. Then he looked at me. I thought I had lost both of you forever. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hate him. Another part wanted to ask him everything. Who was he? Why had he never found us? Why had his family hidden us? And most importantly, why had he come back now? My mother seemed to read my thoughts. She looked at Victor. Why are you here? Victor hesitated. Then he answered. I didn't come here because of the tattoo. My heart tightened. What do you mean? He looked directly at me. I recognized you before you told me your mother's name. I frowned. How? Victor's eyes filled with tears. Because you have my eyes. I stared at him. He continued. I've seen photographs of myself at your age. He pointed at my face. The same eyes. The same scar above your eyebrow. Even the way you tilt your head when you're confused. He took a shaky breath. I knew. My mother looked at him. Then why did you wait? Victor's voice became quieter. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That I was too late. The room fell silent again. Then Victor reached into his pocket. He placed a small black box on the table. I brought this for you. I opened it. Inside was a gold ring. 2 circles intertwined. The same symbol as the tattoos. On the inside of the ring were 2 tiny letters. MB. My mother's initials. And Victor's. I looked up. Why are you giving me this? Victor stared at me. Because it belonged to your mother. My mother gasped. She recognized it immediately. For the first time that night, she reached toward him. But she stopped before touching the box. Victor whispered. I kept it all these years. My mother began to cry. And then, outside the window, a black SUV slowly stopped across the street. None of us noticed it. Inside the vehicle, two men were watching our house. One of them lifted a phone. He's here. A pause. Yes. He looked toward the house. The old man found the boy. Then he made another call. And on the other end of the line, a woman's cold voice answered. Then we have a problem. The next morning, I woke up feeling as if I'd lived through someone else's life. For 32 years, I had believed my father was a nameless man who had walked away before I was born. Now I knew his name. Victor Blackwood. A billionaire. A man whose photograph appeared in newspapers and business magazines. A man who owned companies, private jets, luxury estates, and more money than I could imagine. And somehow, he was my father. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face when he recognized me. I saw him kneeling on the cafe floor. I heard him whisper, "My son." But there was something else I couldn't stop thinking about. The black SUV parked outside our house. I didn't know who those men were. I didn't know why they had been watching us. And I didn't tell my mother. She had already suffered enough. At breakfast, she sat quietly at the kitchen table. The small black box containing the ring was in front of her. She hadn't touched it since Victor left. "Mom," I said. She looked up. "Yes? Do you still love him?" Her eyes filled with tears. For several seconds, she didn't answer. Then she whispered, "I don't know." That was the first time I'd ever heard my mother admit that she didn't know something. Before I could say anything else, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered. "Hello?" A man's voice came through. "Is this Ethan Cole?" "Yes." "This is Victor Blackwood." I sat up straight. "Is everything okay?" "I need to talk to you." "About what?" There was a pause. "About my family." My stomach tightened. "What about them?" "They know about you." I looked toward my mother. She was watching me. Victor continued. "My wife knows. My son knows." "Your wife?" "Her name is Victoria Blackwood." He hesitated. "My son is Ryan Blackwood." I had heard those names before. Victoria Blackwood was a powerful woman in her own right. She was known in business circles as the woman who controlled Blackwood Industries from behind the scenes. And Ryan was Victor's only officially recognized child. The heir. The future chairman. Victor's voice became quieter. "They're not happy." I almost laughed. "That's an understatement." "They may try to contact you." "Why?" "Because they are afraid." "Afraid of me?" "Not you." He paused. "They're afraid of what happens if the truth becomes public." I looked at my mother. She had already understood from my expression that something was wrong. Victor continued. "I want you to come to my office." "Why?" "I want to tell you everything before someone else tells you their version." I hesitated. "Will your family be there?" "No." "Then I'll come." That afternoon, I drove downtown. Blackwood Tower stood above the city like a monument to money. 47 floors of glass and steel. A security guard checked my name twice before allowing me inside. The receptionist looked at me. Then at the computer. Then back at me. Her expression changed. She had obviously heard something. I walked toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. Old jeans. Cheap jacket. Worn shoes. I looked exactly like what I was. A cafe waiter. Then the elevator doors opened on the 47th floor. Victor was waiting. He looked different from the man I'd seen in the cafe. Here, surrounded by his empire, he seemed powerful again. But when he saw me, that image disappeared. He smiled. "Come in." His office was enormous. Glass walls. A panoramic view of the city. Paintings that probably cost more than our entire neighborhood. But Victor didn't seem interested in any of it. He walked toward a cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "This contains everything I was able to find." He placed it on the desk. I opened it. There were photographs. Letters. Old legal documents. A hospital record. And then I saw something that made my hands go cold. A birth certificate. My name. Ethan Cole. Mother, Mara Cole. Father. Blank. Victor pointed to the document. My family made sure my name never appeared. How? Money. Lawyers. Connections. He looked ashamed. "I spent years believing your mother had abandoned me. Why didn't you investigate?" "I did." He opened another folder. "After my father died, I discovered that several people had been paid to keep information from me." I looked through the documents. There were bank transfers. Private investigators' reports. Old addresses. Every trail ended mysteriously. Someone had been hiding us. For decades. Then Victor said something that made my blood run cold. "They didn't just hide you from me." He looked directly at me. "They tried to make sure I never found you." "Why?" "Because my father believed you would threaten Ryan's inheritance." I stared at him. "Your father died years ago." "Yes." "Then why should anyone still care?" Victor's expression hardened. "Because the people who benefited from his decisions are still alive." Before I could ask who, the office door opened. A woman walked in. Elegant. Cold. Perfectly composed. She was in her late 50s. Her black suit was flawless. Her eyes were sharp. Victor stood. "Victoria." She looked at me. Her expression changed immediately. Not surprise. Recognition. She already knew exactly who I was. "So," she said quietly. "You're Ethan." I didn't answer. She looked at Victor. "You actually brought him here." Victor's voice was firm. "He's my son." Victoria smiled. But there was no warmth in it. "That's exactly the problem." Victoria Blackwood walked around the desk slowly. She studied me from head to toe. I could almost hear her judging every part of me. My clothes. My shoes. My hands. My entire life. Finally, she looked at Victor. "You've lost your mind." Victor didn't move. "No. You would destroy this family for a woman you haven't seen in 30 years? For my son." Victoria laughed quietly. "Your son?" She looked at me. "Do you know how many people would love to be called Victor Blackwood's son?" I felt my jaw tighten. I didn't ask to be. That stopped her. Victor looked at me. Victoria's smile disappeared. "Then why are you here?" "Because he asked me to come." "Of course." She stepped closer. "You should understand something, Ethan." She said my name like it tasted bitter. "Whatever Victor has told you, you have no place in this family." I looked at Victor. He was silent. I turned back toward her. "I don't want a place in your family." She raised an eyebrow. "I only came because I wanted answers." Victoria smiled again. "Answers are expensive." Victor finally lost his patience. "Enough. Victoria turned toward him. No. Not enough. Her voice became sharper. You have spent your entire life building this company. And now, because a woman appears with a 32-year-old son, you want to throw everything away? Victor's face hardened. He's not some stranger. He is legally a stranger. He is my son. Victoria stepped closer. And Ryan is your heir. Silence. I suddenly understood. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about family. It was about money. And I had walked directly into the middle of a war. Victor looked at me. I need you to understand something. I do. No, Ethan. His voice softened. I don't want you to fight Ryan. I don't want anything from him. I know. He looked toward Victoria. But they may fight you. Victoria gave a cold smile. Not May. She turned toward the door. They will. Then she stopped. Without looking back, she said, Enjoy your reunion. And walked out. The door closed. I looked at Victor. She hates me. Victor sighed. She doesn't hate you. What would you call that? Fear. Of what? Victor looked out over the city. That you will expose everything. I frowned. What everything? He didn't answer. Instead, he opened another file. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. A company acquisition. A series of offshore accounts. And several signatures. One of them belonged to Victoria. My stomach tightened. What is this? Victor looked at me. Things I should have discovered years ago. Are you saying your wife stole from you? I don't know. He closed the file. That's why I need time. Before I left, Victor did something unexpected. He gave me a key. What is this? My old house. Why? Because there's something there I want you to see. I looked at him. What? Your mother's letters. My heart stopped. The letters she said she sent? Victor nodded. I recently found them. Where? In a storage room. Who kept them? Victor looked at me. My father. I couldn't speak. He handed me the key. Take your time. I left his office with more questions than answers. But when I reached the lobby, my phone rang. It was my mother. Ethan? Her voice sounded frightened. Mom? What's wrong? Someone came here. My blood turned cold. Who? I don't know. What happened? She hesitated. They asked about you. I ran toward my truck. What did they say? They told me to stay away from Victor. Did they hurt you? No. Are you sure? Yes. I started the engine. I'm coming home. When I arrived, I found the front door unlocked. My heart nearly stopped. Mom! She appeared from the bedroom. I'm okay. I rushed toward her. Who came? She shook her head. 2 men. Did they say who sent them? No. Then she handed me an envelope. They left this. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me walking into Blackwood Tower. On the back, someone had written, "You don't belong there." I looked at my mother. For the first time, I understood something. Victor had not simply found his lost son. He had reopened a secret that powerful people had spent decades burying. And now someone was willing to do almost anything to keep it buried. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard a car stop outside. I looked through the curtain. A black SUV. The same vehicle from the previous night. The headlights switched off. My phone rang. Victor. I answered immediately. Ethan. Someone is watching our house. I know. There was silence. Then Victor said something that made my blood freeze. Get your mother out of the house. Why? Because this isn't about inheritance anymore. What do you mean? His voice became low. Someone is trying to scare you. Who? I don't know yet. A pause. But I know one thing. What? If they wanted you dead. He stopped. I felt my heart pounding. They wouldn't have left a warning. Underscore 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 underscore. The next few weeks changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Victor started coming to our house regularly. Not as a billionaire. Not as the owner of Blackwood Industries. But as a father trying desperately to make up for 32 lost years. Sometimes he brought flowers. Sometimes groceries. Once, he arrived carrying an old wooden rocking chair. I remember your mother liked these. Mom stared at it. I don't want your gifts. Victor nodded. I understand. He left the chair anyway. She eventually kept it. I noticed that. She never admitted it meant something. But she started sitting in it every evening. Victor also began taking me to places from his past. The old restaurant where he had first met my mother. The riverfront where they had spent their first summer together. The small park where they had promised to stay together forever. Every place contained a memory. Every memory contained a wound. One afternoon, Victor took me to an old warehouse on the edge of the city. The building looked abandoned. Inside, however, there were dozens of locked storage rooms. He used the key he'd given me. The door opened with a long metallic squeal. Boxes covered the walls. Victor walked to the back. He opened one. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. I picked up the first envelope. The handwriting was my mother's. My hands trembled. She really wrote these. Victor nodded. I found them after my father died. I opened one. The letter was dated 32 years ago. My mother had written, Victor, I'm pregnant. I'm scared. But I still believe we can build a life together. I couldn't continue. I folded the letter. Victor looked away. I never saw that. I know. Another letter. Then another. They all told the same story. She had tried to reach him. She had begged him to come. She had told him about me. Someone had hidden every letter. Victor sat down on an old wooden crate. I lost 32 years. His voice broke. I'll never get them back. I sat beside him. For the first time, I felt sorry for him. Not because he was rich. Not because he was my father. But because I understood that regret can be its own kind of prison. When we returned home that evening, my mother was waiting. She saw the letters in my hands. Her face changed. You found them. I nodded. She closed her eyes. I thought they were gone forever. Victor stood behind me. I'm sorry. Mom looked at him. Then something unexpected happened. She didn't scream. She didn't tell him to leave. She simply said, Sit down. Victor sat. For almost an hour, they talked. Not about money. Not about Blackwood Industries. Not about inheritance. They talked about the life they had lost, the dreams they had once shared, the child they had never raised together. And for the first time, I saw my mother smile at Victor. It lasted only a few seconds. But I saw it. Then everything changed. 2 days later, Victor called me. His voice sounded different. "Ethan, you need to come to the hospital." "What happened?" "I had a heart attack." I froze. "Are you okay?" "I'm alive." "That's not funny." "I know." He took a breath. "I need to tell you something before it's too late." I drove to the hospital immediately. Victor was lying in a private room. Machines surrounded him. His face looked pale. But when he saw me, he smiled. "You came." "Of course." He reached for my hand. I sat beside him. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I want to make things right. You don't owe me anything. I owe you 32 years. I looked at him. "I can't give you those years." "No." He squeezed my hand. "But I can give you the truth." He told me that he had decided to publicly acknowledge me as his son. My stomach tightened. "Why now?" "Because I'm tired of being afraid." He wanted to amend his will. He wanted to establish a trust for my mother. And he wanted me to have a place in the company. I shook my head. "I don't want your company." "You may not want it now." He smiled faintly. "But one day you may understand why I'm offering it." Before I could answer, the hospital room door opened. Victoria walked in. Ryan was behind her. Ryan was 34. Tall. Handsome. Perfectly dressed. And furious. His eyes immediately landed on me. "So this is him." Victor looked at his son. "Ryan." Ryan ignored him. He stared directly at me. "You've caused enough trouble." I stood. "I didn't ask for any of this. You showed up." "I didn't know who my father was." "Don't lie." Ryan stepped closer. "You knew exactly what you were doing." Victor's voice became sharp. "That's enough." Ryan looked at him. "You are really going to give him everything?" "No one is giving anyone anything. He's a stranger." Victor shook his head. "He's your brother." Ryan laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. "He's not my brother." He turned toward me. "He's a waiter." Then he leaned closer. "And you have no idea what you're stepping into." He walked out. Victoria followed. But before leaving, she looked back at Victor. Her expression was unreadable. Victor watched the door close. Then he looked at me. "Ethan." "What?" "If something happens to me." He reached beneath his pillow. He pulled out a sealed envelope. "Do not give this to anyone." I took it. "What's inside?" "You'll know when the time comes." "Victor, what is going on?" His eyes became serious. "Someone inside my family has been moving money." "Who?" "I don't know." "Then why don't you tell the police?" "Because I don't know who I can trust." He looked toward the closed door. "Not even everyone in this hospital is safe." My heart began pounding. Then Victor said the words I would never forget. "If I die before this is resolved, don't trust the first version of my will you see." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He closed his eyes. "Because there may be another will." And that was the moment I realized this was no longer a story about a lost son finding his father. It was becoming something much darker. Someone had spent 32 years hiding my existence. Someone was watching my mother. Someone was moving money inside Victor's empire. And now the billionaire who had just found his son was lying in a hospital bed, afraid that someone close to him might be waiting for him to die. I held the sealed envelope tightly in my hand. And for the first time, I wondered whether finding my father had been the greatest blessing of my life, or the most dangerous mistake I had ever made. For the first time since I had learned the truth about my father, I began to understand that money could be more dangerous than poverty. Poverty had been simple. You knew what you had. You knew what you didn't have. You worked, paid the bills, bought groceries, and tried to make tomorrow a little easier than today. But wealth? Wealth brought lawyers. It brought reporters. It brought people who smiled while calculating what you were worth. And after Leonard Baxter died, my mother and I suddenly became the center of a war we had never asked for. A week after the funeral, I returned to the cafe. I tried to pretend everything was normal. I woke before sunrise, drove my old car through the wet streets, unlocked the front door of Harbor Light, turned on the lights, and started the coffee machines. But nothing felt normal anymore. Every time the door opened, I expected another reporter. Every time someone looked at me for more than a few seconds, I wondered if they recognized me. The headlines were everywhere. Billionaire's secret son to inherit empire? Who really controls the Baxter fortune? Tristan Ward, long-lost heir or opportunist? I hated those headlines. Not because they were completely false. I was Leonard Baxter's son. But because they made it sound as though I had spent 32 years waiting for a fortune. The truth was almost the opposite. I had spent 32 years wondering why my mother never spoke about my father. And when I finally met him, I had only a few weeks with him. Weeks of coffee. Letters. Hospital visits. Quiet conversations. And one word I had never expected to hear from him. Son. Now he was gone. And the only thing I wanted was to grieve in peace. Instead, the entire city seemed determined to turn his death into entertainment. That morning, my mother called me while I was wiping down the counter. Tristan? Her voice sounded different. What's wrong, Mom? There's a car outside. I looked through the window. A black SUV was parked across the street. It had been there for nearly an hour. Are you sure? I'm sure. Don't open the door. I haven't. I could hear the fear in her voice. That frightened me more than the reporters. My mother had survived 30 years of hardship without being afraid of anyone. But now she was afraid to answer her own door. I left the cafe early. When I arrived home, the SUV was gone. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, holding an envelope. What is that? She looked at me. It was under the door. I took it from her. There was no return address. Only my name. Tristan Ward. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Mr. Ward, certain members of the Baxter family would like to discuss a private settlement with you before the will becomes public. There was a phone number at the bottom. My mother stared at me. What does it mean? I folded the paper. It means they're scared. Scared of what? The truth. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Son, please don't let their world swallow you. I looked at her tired face. I won't. But neither of us understood how quickly that world was closing around us. Underscore 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 underscore. 2 days later, I received a call from Mr. Miller, Leonard's attorney. Tristan, I need you and your mother to come to my office. Why? There has been a development. His tone made my stomach tighten. What kind of development? I'd rather explain in person. When I arrived at Miller and Green, the building seemed even more intimidating than before. Glass walls, marble floors, security guards, people in expensive suits moving quickly through the lobby. My mother walked beside me in her simple black coat. She looked completely out of place. But I noticed something that morning. She wasn't ashamed. She was simply tired. Mr. Miller greeted us himself. His expression was serious. "Please sit." We entered a private conference room. On the table was a thick folder. Mr. Miller sat opposite us. "Leonard's will has been formally filed." My mother's fingers tightened around mine. "And?" I asked. He opened the folder. "The primary beneficiary is you, Tristan." I already knew that from the preliminary reading. But hearing it officially still felt strange. "And my mother?" "Your mother is also named." He paused. "Leonard left specific instructions concerning both of you." "What instructions?" Mr. Miller slid another document across the table. "His estate is to be divided according to a very unusual structure." I read the first page. Then the second. My heart began beating faster. "What's wrong?" Mom asked. I looked up. "It's not just Baxter Arms." Mr. Miller nodded. "Correct." Leonard had left me controlling shares in several companies. Real estate. Investment accounts. A private foundation. And something called the Baxter Family Trust. But there was one condition. I had to become the controlling trustee. That meant I wasn't simply inheriting money. I was inheriting responsibility. And that responsibility came with power. A dangerous amount of power. Mr. Miller leaned forward. Leonard knew his family would challenge this. Did he expect them to? He was certain. My mother looked at him. Then why didn't he protect Tristan? Mr. Miller's expression softened. He tried. He reached into the folder and removed a sealed envelope. Leonard recorded a private statement 2 weeks before his death. My heart stopped. A recording? Yes. Can I hear it? Mr. Miller nodded. He pressed a button. Static filled the room. Then I heard a voice. Weak. Rough. But unmistakable. My father's voice. "If you're listening to this, Tristan, I'm probably gone." My throat tightened. My mother closed her eyes. The recording continued. "I know what they will say about you. They'll call you a stranger. They'll say you manipulated me. They'll say you want my money." A pause. A faint breath. "But I know the truth." I stared at the speaker. "You never asked me for anything." "Not once." My eyes burned. "That's why I'm leaving you control of my estate. Not because you're my son. Blood alone isn't enough. I'm leaving it to you because during the short time I knew you, I saw something my own family lost a long time ago." Another pause. "Decency." My mother began crying silently. Then Leonard said something that made my entire body go cold. "But there is one thing you don't know." I leaned closer. "The reason I was kept away from Renee wasn't only because my family hated her." The recording stopped. Silence. I looked at Mr. Miller. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer immediately. My mother suddenly stood. "Turn it off." I looked at her. "Mom? Turn it off." Her face had gone completely pale. "Mom, what aren't you telling me?" She looked at me. For a moment, she seemed unable to speak. Then she whispered. "Because Leonard wasn't the only person who wanted you gone." The room went silent. Mr. Miller stared at her. "Mrs. Ward." She shook her head. I never told Tristan because I wanted him to have a normal life. I stood. Who? She looked down. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? When I was pregnant, someone came to me. Who? I never saw his face. My heart began pounding. What did he want? She swallowed. He told me that if Leonard ever found out where you were, both of us would disappear. I stared at her. Disappear? She nodded. He said Leonard's family wasn't the only danger. For 32 years, I had believed my story was simple. A wealthy young man. A poor woman. A family that separated them. A child raised without his father. But suddenly, that story didn't make sense anymore. My father hadn't simply abandoned us. My mother hadn't simply been pushed away. Someone had been watching us. Someone had wanted me hidden. And perhaps that person was still alive. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, I couldn't sleep. Rain tapped against the apartment windows. My mother was asleep in the next room. I sat alone at the kitchen table with Leonard's recording playing through my headphones. Again. And again. The reason I was kept away from Renee wasn't only because my family hated her. There was something else. Something Leonard had discovered too late. At around 2 a.m, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then a text appeared. You should have left the Baxter name alone. My blood ran cold. Another message arrived. Your father made the same mistake. I stared at the screen. Then another. Stop digging. I stood up. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet. I walked to the window. Across the street, beneath a broken street lamp, a dark sedan was parked. Engine running. Headlights off. I couldn't see the driver's face. Then the headlights came on. The car slowly pulled away. I grabbed my jacket and ran outside. But by the time I reached the street, it was already gone. I stood in the rain, breathing hard. For the first time, I understood something. The inheritance wasn't the real danger. The money was only the reason people were looking at me. The real danger was the secret buried beneath my father's past. And someone was terrified that I might uncover it. Underscore 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 underscore. 3 days later, the will reading was scheduled. My mother didn't want to go. I don't want anything from him, she said. I know. Then why should we? I looked at the envelope containing Leonard's final instructions. Because I think there's something he wanted us to know. She stared at me. Tristan. I need the truth. She sighed. Then slowly nodded. All right. We drove downtown in silence. When we entered the conference room, Elaine and Connor were already there. Connor looked at me and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A warning. Elaine folded her arms. Well, she said coldly, the waiter has arrived. I ignored her. Connor leaned toward me. Enjoy the moment. I looked at him. What moment? The last few minutes before you lose everything. I said nothing. Mr. Miller entered carrying the final documents. Everyone became silent. He adjusted his glasses. Let's begin. He read the standard provisions first. Charitable donations. Employee benefits. Personal possessions. Several properties. Then he reached the final section. His voice became slower. All controlling shares of Baxter Holdings. Connor leaned forward. Shall transfer to Tristan Ward. Silence. Connor's face changed. Mr. Miller continued. All voting rights associated with those shares shall transfer immediately upon probate. Elaine stood. No. Mr. Miller didn't stop. The Baxter Family Trust shall be placed under the administration of Tristan Ward. Connor slammed his hand onto the table. That's impossible. Mr. Miller continued reading. Mrs. Renee Ward shall receive lifetime financial security, including the Fremont property, medical provisions, and a protected trust. My mother covered her mouth. Then came the final sentence. The remaining estate shall be distributed according to the attached charitable provisions. Connor stared at me. You stole my father's mind. I shook my head. No. You manipulated him. No. You waited until he was dying. I looked directly into his eyes. I was the one sitting beside him when he was dying. Connor's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. Then Mr. Miller placed one final document on the table. There is one more item. Everyone stopped. He looked at me. Mr. Baxter requested that this document be opened only after the inheritance was formally transferred. I reached for the envelope. It had my father's handwriting on it. My name. Tristan. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Not of Leonard and Renee. Not of me. It showed 3 people standing outside an old building. Leonard. Renee. And another man. A man I had never seen before. On the back of the photograph, Leonard had written 6 words. This man knows why you disappeared. I looked at my mother. She saw the photograph. And the blood drained from her face. Mom? She whispered one sentence. One sentence that changed everything. Tristan, that's the man who came to me 32 years ago. And suddenly, the inheritance was no longer the biggest mystery in my life. The mystery was who had been trying to erase me from it. For several seconds, neither my mother nor I moved. The photograph lay between us on the polished conference table. 3 people. My father, Leonard Baxter. My mother, Renee. And the stranger standing behind them. His face was young, perhaps in his late 30s, but there was something about his expression that made my skin crawl. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking directly at my father. Like a man waiting for something. I turned the photograph over again. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. This man knows why you disappeared. I looked at my mother. Who is he? She stared at the photograph as though it had suddenly opened a door she had spent 30 years trying to keep locked. I don't know his name. You said he came to you. Yes. Then how can you not know his name? Because he never told me. Her hands began trembling. I reached across the table and held them. Mom, I need the truth. She closed her eyes. When I was pregnant with you, Leonard and I had already separated. I thought his family had one. I thought they had forced him to forget me. She swallowed. But one night, someone came to my apartment. What did he look like? Like the man in that photograph. Exactly? Older now, but yes. What did he say? Her voice dropped. He told me Leonard had changed his mind. My heart tightened. What do you mean? He said Leonard was planning to take me and the baby away from his family. Then why would he threaten you? Because he said if Leonard came looking for us, people would get hurt. I stared at her. Who? I don't know. Mom. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. He told me something else. What? He said, your child is worth more than you understand. The room suddenly seemed colder. I looked at the photograph again. For 32 years, I had believed I was simply the unwanted son of a wealthy man. But what if that wasn't true? What if someone had deliberately hidden me? What if my birth had been connected to something much bigger than a broken romance? I turned to Mr. Miller. Did Leonard ever mention this man? The lawyer's face had changed. He looked uncomfortable. Yes. My heart stopped. You knew? Not everything. What did he tell you? Mr. Miller hesitated. Then he opened another folder. His name was Victor Hale. My mother gasped. I repeated the name. Victor Hale. Mr. Miller nodded. He was once Leonard's closest business partner. Business partner? More than that. Victor helped Leonard build Baxter Holdings during its earliest years. He placed several documents on the table. Then, approximately 30 years ago, the partnership ended. Why? Fraud. I stared at him. Fraud? Victor was accused of diverting company funds through offshore accounts. Leonard discovered it and removed him. My mother whispered. He came to me after that. Mr. Miller nodded. Apparently, Victor blamed Leonard for destroying his career. I looked down at the photograph. So he threatened my mother? That's what Leonard eventually believed. Eventually? Mr. Miller looked at me. Because Leonard didn't know about you until many years later. My stomach dropped. What? He thought Renee had left voluntarily. My mother shook her head. I tried to tell him. You couldn't. She nodded. I was terrified. Then Mr. Miller said something that made my blood run cold. Leonard discovered the truth only a few months before he died. I stared at him. How? He hired a private investigator. He slid a thick envelope toward me. Leonard wanted to know what happened to you and Renee after you disappeared. I opened it. Inside were copies of old records. Addresses. Bank transactions. Photographs. And finally, a surveillance photograph. Victor Hale. Older now. White hair. A gray beard. Standing outside my cafe. I looked at the date. 3 weeks before Leonard's death. My hands went numb. He was watching me. Mr. Miller nodded. Yes. My mother covered her mouth. Then Leonard knew. He knew something was wrong, Miller said. But he didn't have enough evidence. I stared at the photograph. Where is Victor now? Mr. Miller's answer was quiet. That's the problem. He looked at me. Nobody knows. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, I refused to tell my mother everything I had learned. She had already lived through enough. Instead, I told her we needed to leave Seattle for a while. She didn't argue. The next morning, we packed only what we needed. Clothes. Documents. My father's letters. The photograph. And the old picture of Leonard and Renee with their matching tattoos. We drove north toward the coast. I wanted distance. From Seattle. From the Baxter family. From the reporters. From Victor Hale. But I knew running wouldn't solve anything. Someone had spent 30 years hiding the truth. I wanted to know why. We eventually settled in a quiet coastal town on the Olympic Peninsula. It was small, peaceful. The kind of place where people greeted you without asking who your father was. For the first time in months. Continued. For the first time in months, I woke up without the sound of reporters outside my window. No cameras. No shouting. No strangers asking whether I was really Leonard Baxter's son. Just the sound of waves breaking somewhere beyond the trees. Our new house stood on a quiet hillside overlooking the Pacific. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't anything like Baxter Hill. It was a modest two-story house with weathered wooden walls, a small porch, and a view of the ocean that seemed almost unreal. My mother loved it immediately. She planted lavender along the porch. I began looking for a small building where I could open a cafe. For a few weeks, life felt almost normal. But I couldn't forget the photograph. Victor Hale. The man who had watched my family for 30 years. The man my father had feared. And the man who had somehow disappeared before Leonard could expose him. One afternoon, I was sitting alone in the empty cafe I had just rented when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then I remembered the messages. I picked up. Hello? Silence. Then a man's voice. Old. Calm. Almost gentle. You finally left Seattle. My entire body froze. Who is this? A quiet laugh. You already know. Victor? The line went silent for several seconds. Then he said, Your father should have left the past alone. My hand tightened around the phone. What did you do to my mother? I didn't hurt Renee. You threatened her. I protected her. From what? From your father. I stood up. You're lying. No, Tristan. His voice became colder. Leonard was never the man you thought he was. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked. Then tell me the truth. Another silence. You aren't ready. I am. Then come to the old Baxter warehouse. My heart stopped. Where? Pier 47. Why? You want answers. Yes. Then come alone. The call ended. I immediately knew I shouldn't go. Every instinct told me it was a trap. But I also knew something else. If I ignored Victor, I might never learn the truth. So I called Mr. Miller. I told him everything. His answer was immediate. Do not go alone. I won't. He contacted private security. Within an hour, 2 investigators were on their way. I didn't tell my mother. I couldn't risk frightening her. That evening, I drove back toward Seattle. Rain covered the highway. The city appeared through the fog like a memory I wanted to forget. Pier 47 was almost deserted. The old warehouse had been abandoned for years. Broken windows. Rusting doors. Graffiti covering the walls. I parked several blocks away. Security followed at a distance. I entered through a side door. Inside, the warehouse smelled of dust, oil, and salt water. Then I heard footsteps. A man stepped out of the darkness. Older than the photograph. Gray hair. A long black coat. Victor Hale. He looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled. You look like him. My father? Yes. I stepped closer. You threatened my mother. Victor shook his head. No. I warned her. About what? About the people around Leonard. I stared at him. What people? Victor reached into his coat. I immediately stepped back. But he pulled out an old envelope. He threw it onto a wooden crate. Open it. Inside was a letter. The paper was yellow with age. The handwriting belonged to Leonard. I read the first line. Victor, if anything happens to me, protect Renee and the boy. My breath caught. I looked up. What is this? Victor's expression hardened. Your father discovered that someone inside Baxter Holdings was stealing money. Was it you? No. Then who? Victor looked directly into my eyes. Elaine. I froze. What? Your father's wife. I couldn't breathe. Victor continued. Elaine had been secretly moving company money through shell corporations for years. I shook my head. Why would my father marry her? Because Leonard didn't know. Then why did you get blamed? Because Elaine needed someone to take the fall. The pieces began moving inside my head. Victor had been accused of fraud. Removed from the company. His reputation destroyed. But if Elaine had framed him, then everything changed. Why didn't you expose her? Victor laughed bitterly. Because she threatened Renee. My blood went cold. She knew about my mother? She knew about you. I stepped toward him. Then why didn't you tell Leonard? I tried. When? 30 years ago. He pointed toward the letter. Leonard received a package containing evidence. What happened? He never saw it. Why? Victor looked at me. Because Elaine intercepted it. My mind raced. Then my mother wasn't abandoned by Leonard. Victor's voice became quiet. She was deliberately erased. I felt something break inside me. 30 years. 30 years my mother had believed Leonard chose money over her. 30 years Leonard had believed she abandoned him. And all that time, someone had manipulated both of them. Why did you disappear? Victor looked toward the dark ocean outside. Because after I discovered what Elaine had done, I knew I was next. And you watched us? Yes. Why? Because I promised Leonard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cassette recorder. Listen. I pressed play. Static. Then Leonard's voice. Weak. Terrified. Victor, if you can hear this, I've finally found Renee. My eyes widened. I know what happened. I know Elaine intercepted your evidence. A pause. But she's already discovered that I know. Then another voice. Elaine. Cold. Furious. You think you can destroy me, Leonard? The recording continued. If you go to the police, Renee dies. The boy disappears. And you lose everything. My father's voice trembled. Leave them alone. Elaine laughed. You don't understand. The boy isn't just your son. The recording stopped. I stared at Victor. What did she mean? Victor's face was grim. That's what Leonard was trying to discover. What? Your birth records. I felt confused. What about them? Victor handed me another document. It was an old hospital record. My mother's name. My date of birth. And one handwritten note. Paternity documentation withheld by family request. I looked at Victor. What does this mean? It means Elaine tried to make sure your existence could never be legally proven. But the DNA test. Leonard eventually obtained one. Why did he wait so long? Because he didn't know where you were. I lowered my head. All those years. All those wasted years. Not because my father didn't love me. Not entirely. but because powerful people had manipulated the truth. And then I remembered something. Victor. Yes? Why did Elaine want me erased? He didn't answer. That frightened me more than anything. Finally, he said. Because if Leonard ever acknowledged you, you would become his legal heir. I stared at him. That was it? No. He looked directly at me. Because you were born before Leonard married Elaine. My stomach tightened. What difference does that make? Victor's expression changed. Your father had signed a private inheritance agreement before your birth. What agreement? One that gave his firstborn child controlling rights to Baxter Holdings. I felt the room spinning. I suddenly understood. I wasn't simply the son who had appeared from nowhere. I had been the heir all along. Elaine hadn't been fighting me because she hated me. She had been fighting because she had spent 30 years protecting her own son's position. And Connor wasn't supposed to inherit the empire. I was. Victor handed me one final document. It was signed by Leonard. At the bottom was a sentence that made my eyes fill with tears. My firstborn son, Tristan, shall be the guardian of everything I built. I closed my eyes. My father had known. He had been searching for me. And in the end, he had found me. But there was one question left. Where is Elaine now? Victor looked toward the warehouse entrance. She knows you have this. My heart stopped. What? A car engine suddenly roared outside. Headlights flooded through the broken windows. Victor grabbed my arm. Run! We sprinted toward the rear exit. A black SUV crashed through the warehouse doors. Security shouted from outside. Someone fired. I dropped behind a concrete pillar. Victor pushed me down. Stay there. Another shot echoed. Then police sirens exploded in the distance. The SUV reversed violently and disappeared into the rain. Victor stood slowly. He looked at me. Now you understand. I nodded. But my hands were shaking. Understand what? He looked toward the empty road. The war never ended. Underscore 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 underscore. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Federal investigators uncovered financial records connecting Elaine to the shell companies Victor had described. Millions had been moved. Evidence had been hidden. Witnesses had been pressured. And the most shocking discovery was a private security contract dating back 32 years. Its purpose? Locate and monitor Renee Ward and her child. My mother read the report in silence. Then she began crying. Not because she was afraid. Because she finally knew. Leonard hadn't forgotten her. He had been looking for her. I sat beside her. She took my hand. Your father loved us. I nodded. Yes. And I spent 30 years hating him. You didn't know. She looked at me. I know. Then she whispered. I forgive him. The legal battle that followed lasted months. Elaine was removed from control of Baxter Holdings. Her financial accounts were frozen pending investigation. Connor disappeared from public life. The family empire survived, but it was no longer ruled by the people who had nearly destroyed it. And I had a decision to make. I could become exactly what everyone expected. A billionaire. A powerful businessman. A man surrounded by security guards and lawyers. Or I could become something else. Something my father had never managed to become. Free. I kept control of the company. But I changed its direction. I created a foundation for single mothers, scholarships for children raised without fathers, legal assistance for families manipulated by powerful people. And I opened the cafe I had dreamed about. I named it Interlock. 2 rings. 1 broken. 1 restored. My mother helped me every morning. She planted lavender outside. She baked pastries. And sometimes, when the cafe was quiet, she would sit near the window and touch the tattoo on her wrist. The same tattoo that had changed my entire life. One evening, years later, I found myself standing outside after closing. The ocean was glowing beneath the sunset. My mother came out beside me. Thinking about him? I nodded. Every day. She smiled. He would be proud. I looked at the tattoo on my wrist. 2 interlocking rings. A symbol that had once represented a broken promise. Now it meant something different. Family. Truth. And forgiveness. I finally understood why my father had left me his fortune. It wasn't because he wanted me to become rich. It was because he wanted me to become better than the people who had destroyed his life. Money had brought me into his world. But it wasn't money that saved me. It was the truth. The truth about my father. The truth about my mother. And the truth about the man who had spent 30 years trying to erase me. I never became the man everyone expected me to be. I didn't build another empire. I didn't seek revenge. I simply used what I had been given to help people who reminded me of my mother. Because in the end, I learned something my father understood only when it was too late. You can spend 30 years building an empire. You can buy companies, houses, cars, and everything money can possibly buy. But you cannot buy back one lost morning with the person you love. You cannot buy back a childhood. You cannot buy back trust. And you cannot buy back time. My father lost 32 years with his son. My mother lost 32 years believing she had been abandoned. And I lost 32 years believing I wasn't wanted. But somehow, through all the lies, all the pain, and all the secrets, we finally found each other. Even if it was only for a little while. So whenever someone asks me about the tattoo on my wrist, I tell them the truth. It started with 2 people who promised they would never let go. Then powerful people tore them apart. But the promise survived. It survived 30 years of silence. It survived betrayal. It survived greed. It survived death. And in the end, it brought a father and his son back together. Not in time to live the life we should have had. But just in time for me to understand what he had been trying to say all along. Family isn't defined by the years you spent together. It's defined by the love that survives the years you were forced apart. And sometimes, the person everyone calls an outsider is the one who was meant to inherit the truth all along.